Well, that was rough. Good morning and welcome to another episode of Gone Fishin' on the 5 Reasons Sports Podcast Network. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe here. It helps us grow the channel here at 5 Reasons. We've got coverage on Inter Miami and Messi Mania down here. We've got coverage on the Miami Dolphins as their training camp progresses, the Miami Heat as Dame Watch continues, the Miami Hurricanes as their camp opens up and college football season is right around the corner. And then we have some of the finest NHL coverage as well for when that comes back around. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Help grow the things that we do here. And boy, as we touch on the Marlins now, that was something over the last couple weeks or so. The Marlins 5-16 over their last 21 games, 58-55 on the season, 3 games over 500, a half game out of the Chicago Cubs for the final wild card spot, and going into arguably the biggest series of the year with the Cincinnati Reds, who are right there with Miami, a half game out of that final wild card spot. One of the teams that Miami's really jostling with, to help get this thing into the postseason. And I want to start off, as always, with your minor league players of the week. And I'm going to go with the pitching first. I'm going to give it to Carson Milbrandt. A really solid start for him. He's been good of late at the new level in High A Beloit. He's starting to really live up to that prospect billing. One of the better young pitchers in the Marlins organization. But I really want to spend a lot of time talking about the next guy here. And the next guy, your minor league player of the week for your position players, is going to be Xavier Edwards. He is slashing over his last week a ridiculous 692 average, 742 on base, 962 slugging, 2 homers, 9 runs batted in, 5 walks, 1 strikeout. And the Herald just did a piece on the Marlins having potentially 2 batting champions between AAA and at the major league level. Going to get a little bit more into Edwards and what I think that means for him, what I think it should mean for the Marlins. But I will be touching on that a little bit more later. I do want to kind of go over what we saw in Arlington because, quite frankly, it was not pretty. The Marlins get lit up by the Rangers, who are absolutely look like every bit the World Series contender that they were advertised to be coming into this series. I mean, they've got a ton of power. You go Friday night, and they get Luzardo, they get to Luzardo. Saturday, it was Soriano, and then the whole Weathers situation, and I do want to touch on that for just a second. And I know that this has been talked about to ad nauseum, and I understand that. Personally, I think it was malpractice to even send the guy out there. And I understand that, perhaps the bullpen was gassed or there just wasn't much there. And I know that they had touted Weathers as starting pitching depth. But I didn't think that it was going to be usable depth this year. I didn't think that it was something that they considered to be depth that we could actually see on the field this year. Because the vibe that I got when the Marlins had acquired Ryan Weathers was, okay, yeah, you know what? This is going to be a guy that when we bring into our organization, we send him down to AAA, we work with him, we develop him in the off season. Maybe Mel takes a look at him. We go into spring training with Weathers competing for one of the back end rotation spots, right? And I think that they viewed it much in the same way that Weathers was more so just like, hey, this is a project that we're taking on. I, don't get me wrong, he absolutely showed flashes of what he can do. I like the fastball there at 97. I like some of the things that Weathers does, but I think it's abundantly clear, and it's been abundantly clear that he was not ready to pitch at the major league level, much less against an offense as good as the Rangers in a situation where the game was 5-3. Um, and I don't want to play Monday morning quarterback too much because my information on this is limited. Maybe there was something else that was going on that forced them into using Weathers or forced their hand. My thing is this: there's two things that could have been done. One, Tanner Scott was warming in the bullpen at multiple times that day, so he was on the table. Number two, Stephen Okert had gone a really clean 3 batters there, only threw 12 pitches. I would have been extremely comfortable sending him out for a second inning, and that would have cut Weathers, appearance by another inning. On top of that, I would have brought in Scott in the ninth, to keep it a 2-run ball game, and then that Berger home run, or I'm sorry, in the eighth, and then that Berger home run in the ninth becomes a game tying home run. But this isn't about what I would do, really. It's not even about that so much as I get the feeling with the Weathers thing that it's a lot like everything else that they've done this year, where they'll make plans and then something happens and then they're just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. And I think that's a really tough way to go about it. Um, I do think that they had the arms to use in the bullpen. You can't tell me everybody was unavailable. And considering that Sandy was the pitcher going the next day, I would have thought, maybe they would have felt comfortable selling out the bullpen a little bit, knowing that Sandy can get them a little bit of length the next day. Now, granted, I would have been wrong about that because Sandy didn't give them his usual length on Sunday. But I think that would have been probably a little bit more sound reasoning to me, because if I'm looking at the probabilities, I'm looking at, okay, is Sandy going to go long, or is Weathers going to pitch, 3 really solid innings versus the best offense in baseball? And again, I hate to single out Weathers here, but it's not an indictment that he's not ready to face the Rangers offense. It's not an indictment on the player. It's an indictment on the organization for putting him in that position in the first place. At least as far as I'm concerned. And then on Sunday, the offense just doesn't show up. They get shut out. Andrew Haney, old pal of the Marlins, Andrew Haney, pitches a really solid game against them. The Rangers shut them out. Offense can't get much going, even in Arlington. They scored 10 runs total in the series. And that's just not going to do it against the Rangers, averaging a shade over 3 runs per game. Because I think that now you're looking at, okay, well, where are the avenues that this team needs to improve? Where are the avenues that this team needs to improve? And I think that they need to improve in all aspects. And I'm going to touch on how I think they can improve in all aspects ahead of this series versus the Reds. One of those things I think is already happening in the rotation, and that's calling up Yuri Perez. And so now I think you're going to be going into, this stretch run here, the remainder of August, September, with one of the best 1-2-3s in baseball between Sandy, Luzardo, and Perez. Because even though Sandy kind of got rocked a little bit on Sunday, I still think that was one of his better starts of the year, regardless, because I think that the defense kind of behind him failed him just a little bit. A few crucial errors there by John Birdie. And that's not to single him out either. He's been pretty good defensively all year long, but he was bad on Sunday. No two ways around that. But I did think Sandy pitched pretty well on Sunday, especially considering the opponent. So I think he continued his stronger stretch of pitching. So if he continues that, you've got Luzardo, and then you've got Perez as your 1-2-3. Then you're filling it out with Braxton Garrett and Johnny Cueto, who have been really serviceable, solid pitchers. They're going to eat innings, 5-6 innings at a time for you. and keep you in ball games. And I think that that's really all you can ask out of your 4 or 5 starters, especially when you have a 1, 2, 3 as dynamic as what the Marlins could have if things do go right there. And now the lineup is where things get a little bit more interesting. I know that there's been renewed debate on that recently. Where should players be hitting, who should be in the lineup, um, and there's a few things that I think I would really like to see happen with this ball club. Number one, I'm ready to end the Avi experiment, and I know that it's easier said than done, and there's some out there that will say, "Hey, you've got to play the money." Personally, I don't subscribe to that. I don't believe in that. I think you play the best 9 players on the field and you let it ride from there. And I don't think Garcia's proven himself to be one of the best 9 players on the field. Secondarily, I'm ready to call it quits on the Joey Wendell everyday shortstop experience, and they've started to mix in John Birdie there a little bit, right? They've started to mix that in, and I do appreciate some of that, because I think that the bat that Birdie gives you is just invaluable. Um, and this is where I think Xavier Edwards kind of fits into this whole thing is at the shortstop position. And I already know what's going to be said. He's not a shortstop. And I want everyone to consider, I've thought about this. I've considered that thought. Defensively might not be a very good shortstop, and I don't care. I don't. Because I think that the value added by being a premium bat in this lineup negates being a below average defender. I I, I mean, I look at the Phillies a couple years ago and what they do, what they still do, having Schwarber running around in left field. Now I know left field is a far less premium defensive position than shortstop, but regardless, I don't really care, because I think that inherently the value that a bat can give you is much more valuable than what you can get on defense. I mean, unless you've just got, I mean, this is all within reason, right? Xavier Edwards has some experience at shortstop. I'm not proposing that the Marlins move Josh Bell to center field or anything ridiculous like that. That's not, and I don't think the two things should be conflated or looked at in the same way, because you're looking at a guy in Edwards now who is starting to flash a little bit of pop on top of the ridiculous batting average, on top of the ridiculous on base, on top of the ridiculous eye that he's got at the dish at AAA. I mean, he's got twice as many walks as strikeouts. He puts the bat on the ball. He's starting to hit for a little bit of slugging of late. And on top of that, he's a guy that can steal bases. I mean, just imagine where the Marlins could be, with a 1-2 in the order of Edwards leading off, Arraez batting second, right? And the idea is this, right? I flirted with the idea of proposing Arraez 1, Edwards 2, or some other variation of that. And my thinking is, and this is all presupposing that what Edwards does in AAA is going to translate, and there's no guarantee that it does, and I acknowledge that. I acknowledge there's no guarantee that it translates. But I do think that I don't think he would be any worse than Joey Wendell at shortstop at the moment for this ball club, just in terms of on-field production. And Joey Wendell's a good guy, don't get me wrong, but right now this team is scuffling, and they need to make changes. Something needs to give here for them to right this ship. And I do think Edwards is one of those answers for this ball club, because your offense becomes so much more dynamic when you've got a guy like Edwards who can get on base, not only get on base, but steal second and get in scoring position for arguably your most consistent hitter in Luis Arraez. And all of a sudden, and it wouldn't work like that all the time. And I acknowledge that, but maybe 35% of the time, or even a quarter of the time, if you've got Edwards on second, nobody out, and Arise coming to the plate, he's scoring a decent portion of the time, in that scenario. I'm a fan of moving Soler a little bit further down in the order, not because I think he's inherently really struggling. I just think he's got a little bit too much swing and miss in his game, and I would much rather a guy like Arise be able to move over a runner in certain situations, because it feels like with Soler, like if it's not an extra base hit, he's not scoring the runner. And I know that Soler's got plenty of pop, plenty of juice. He can get you those extra base hits. But I just think having like literally the profile between Edwards and Arise is so identical. And again, that's not to say that Edwards would be Arise when he comes up, but if he can be a really solid player that gets on base at a 380 clip leading off, and then he's able to steal a base, get into scoring position for Arise, I mean, that just changes the entire complexion of your offense, and it helps lengthen your lineup even further out. But I don't want to harp on that forever. But Xavier Edwards, I do think, is a piece to this puzzle. And I hear the defensive concerns. I appreciate the defensive concerns. I don't care about the defensive concerns, because it's just, I've considered it, I've thought about it, and I just think that given the team's needs, I mean, this is a team that played Gene Segura at third base, for goodness sake. I mean, let's not delude ourselves here. I mean, you moved Arise from first to second, and Arise had previous experience at second base, but the book on him was that he was going to be a below average fielder, and he's come out and he's been one of the better defensive second basemen in the game. You move Jazz to center field when, you're really just hoping the athleticism translates. So I don't think that they're above trying out a guy like Edwards at short. I just don't, especially when the upside is what it could be. And then looking at the bullpen's in just a complete state of disarray right now, considering some of the guys that they have pitching. I mean, you had Devin Smeltzer pitching in the 8th and 9th inning of a game in the last series. And then you had him pitching actually 2 days in a row. Pitched very well, mind you. But regardless, he pitched. They called up Jeff Hartlieb. He pitched. They pitched Ryan Weathers. The bullpen's not in a good way right now. JT Chagua, 15-day IL. Maybe there's a chance he's been injured even longer than that. Who knows? But David Robertson has blown 2 saves already in his time with the club since being acquired. Not to say that I think that that's going to continue per se, but it's just when it rains, it pours with the bullpen right now. But I'm looking at it, and I do see a little bit of hope on the horizon. And I see it in the form of 2 things. Number one, I think the increased stability that you're going to get from the starting rotation with Yuri in it is going to benefit the bullpen. And then secondarily, I do think that there are guys that can get the call, and I think likely will get the call as the the calendar turns from September towards August. And I don't want to ever paint one guy to be the bullpen savior, but I think when you've got Nardi and when you've got Okert and Scott and Puck and Robertson and Soriano as a longer guy that you trust, I do think that adding just one more guy could really be the difference between things. And I think that guy could be in their organization already in the form of Anthony Maldonado. He's been on the IL of late, but he pitched a clean rehab inning in Jupiter. Struck out the side, all 3 struck out the side in 1 inning of work. But you look at his numbers at AAA on the season, and when he does come back, he's pitched about 30 innings at AAA to a 2.35 ERA, a 151 batting average against, and he's striking out almost 15 batters per 9 innings. That's that. I mean, when you're looking at, and then on top of that, he's only walking about 3 batters per 9. So when you look at that, you're looking at bullpen. You want a few things. You want swing and miss, and you want strikes. And oh, by the way, he's also got a little bit of closing experience at the level. I mean, when you're looking at prospects out of the pen that you want to bring up, I mean, that's check, check, and check. You're looking at guys that have a high strikeout rate, that throw strikes, that don't generate a lot of contact. They don't get hit a lot. You know, he allows less than 5 hits per 9. So I think Anthony Maldonado is a guy that can get called up and be a high leverage arm almost immediately. You can start throwing him in the 7th, 8th inning of games. You know, kind of akin to, some of the other guys that you've seen come up, kind of like a right-handed Andrew Nardi was last year. And I know Nardi struggled, but I think Maldonado, just comparing that level of dominance at that AAA level, and how willing they can and how willing I think they should be to pitch him right away in games that matter. But I do want to just touch on, before we go here, the Marlins, a 3-game set against the Reds, who are also scuffling. And that this feels like it's kind of an inflection point series for them. They've got Yuri going. They've got Yuri going tonight against Brandon Williamson, and this is one where the Marlins need this series, because this is a series where you've got 2 teams that are really struggling, and it really feels like the winner of this series has a chance to turn things around for good in their season. And so the Marlins on the road at Cincinnati coming off of a sweep, or getting swept by the Nats. So they're not in a good way themselves. They've had issues with their starting pitching. They're winless since the deadline. The Marlins need to get this done. They need to win 2 out of 3 here. They need to, and then get home, play the Yankees, and that's got to be another series that they absolutely are able to win. But right now, it's just all about putting one foot in front of the other. Perez is back. Hopefully he's able to kind of recapture some of that good feeling that they had in the clubhouse when he was up and really dominating. And I think that's, a lot of people will point to their record since he's been sent down. And I don't want to make more of it than it is, but I do think that there's something to it, because when you have a young player that's up and he's exciting and he's playing well, it infuses your team with an energy. And I think that they've been kind of lacking that kind of energy of late. We'll see what happens tonight with the lineup with Jazz, if he's still out, if they're going to be extra cautious with him coming off of his cramps in Arlington. But Jazz is a guy that you absolutely need to play, because of the fact that, I mean, and it's frustrating, because when he's been on the field the last few times, he's been fantastic. He's been really good since he's come back off of both injuries, since he came back in May, and since he's come back this time around. So the Marlins need a healthy Jazz. They need Yuri to show up and really be a stabilizing force in this rotation. Fair or not to him, as a rookie pitcher, but he's definitely proven himself worthy of that expectation. I'd like to see Xavier Edwards up at shortstop, regardless of the defense. I don't care. I just want that bat in the lineup every day. And then I'd like to see them get Anthony Maldonado a shot when he's healthy and when he's ready to go, to kind of infuse a little bit of that youth into the bullpen, and give you another right-handed option specifically for the late innings. But there's going to be a lot to cover over the next week or so. The Marlins in a really, really, really pivotal spot over this next week, facing the Reds and the Yankees, 2 of their more winnable series in this extremely tough stretch. And we will be here to cover it all with you at Gone Fishin'. So be sure to hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share the podcast, share your thoughts with me on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Wiedeke, and we will see you guys next time. Thank you so much. Bye.